Imagine someone hauling in roughly $200 million in career earnings, only to find themselves empty-pocketed later. This actually happened, and not just to one player, but many of them. We're talking NBA legends who once lived in mansions, partied wildly, and wore hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gear, only to see it all slip away. Their stories make for a shocking reminder. No matter how big your paycheck, money isn't guaranteed to last. We've pieced together each tale from news archives and public records to bring you the true story behind the headlines. Let's start with some of the most shocking examples, then work our way through others you may have heard about. Allen Iverson's name alone screams basketball royalty. As the Hall of Famer battled in the paint and dazzled with his killer crossover, he also racked up a mind-blowing fortune. Over 14 seasons, he banked on the order of $200 to $250 million in salary and endorsements. Yet by the time he hung up his sneakers in 2012, Iverson confessed to a judge that he could not even afford a cheeseburger. How does one of the greatest scorers ever go from hundreds of millions to near zero? Iverson's spending was legendary. He reveled in luxury cars, studded jewelry, and famously dropped $30 to $40K on a single night out at clubs. He even admitted to stashing bundles of cash in garbage bags rather than in banks. The Washington Post reported that by 2012, after defaults on loans and unpaid bills piled up, he filed for bankruptcy. Today, the only thing propping up his lifestyle is a lifetime Reebok deal, around $800K a year. A far cry from his peak income. Iverson now lives more modestly, but his tale is a cautionary one. Even $200 million isn't safe without care. Antoine Walker's fall reads like a textbook on what not to do with sudden wealth. A three-time All-Star and NBA champion, Walker was picked fifth in the 1996 draft and quickly signed a $71 million deal at age 21. Over a 13-year career, he grossed about $108 million in salary. Pretty soon, that stack of cash felt endless, and Walker admits he just didn't have the financial education to handle it. He bought luxury cars, expensive homes, and went on lavish vacations, all while the bills piled up behind him. By 2010, he was in a crunch. Court records show Walker filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy that year, listing only $4.3 million in assets against $12.7 million in liabilities. This was after he'd already been hit with a $900,000 gambling check scandal in Las Vegas and other debts. In interviews, he says he learned from all these mistakes. He eventually managed to climb out of the red and now devotes himself to teaching younger athletes the hard-earned lesson that without education, money comes fast and leaves even faster. Antoine Walker's story is a reminder. No matter how much you make, without financial smarts, it's easy to end up underwater. Latrell Sprewell is infamous for another reason. He once quit on his own team. But his money story is just as wild. Over 13 NBA seasons, he pulled in nearly $100 million. Yet in 2004, with his career winding down, he shocked everyone by turning down a 3-year, $21 million contract with the Timberwolves, explaining, "I've got my family to feed." It sounds noble, but nobody expected that move to backfire so badly. With no other offers forthcoming, Sprewell's bank account quickly dried up. Not long after, in the late 2000s, he watched his world fall apart. He defaulted on a $1.3 million boat loan, leading to his 70-foot yacht being auctioned off. And he fell behind on a $1.5 million mortgage on his Milwaukee home. By 2015, he had lost not one, but 2 houses. On top of it all, state tax records show Sprewell owed Wisconsin over $3.5 million in unpaid income taxes. In other words, he was not just spending recklessly, he had massive debts. Years later, he ended up renting a modest apartment like an average Joe. Rather than living the star's life he once had, Latrell's quip about family feeding became ironic. Turning down that contract was one of his last big financial mistakes. His saga underscores that brash pride and neglecting the advice of advisors can cost everything. Then there's Dennis Rodman, the Worm, known for rebounding dominance and off-court antics. Rodman never earned as much as today's stars, roughly $27 million in career salary by conservative estimates, but he spent like a king. Extravagance was Rodman's middle name. Countless kids to support, extended family to entertain, and the costliest partying around the globe. On top of living large, Rodman fell prey to a notorious scammer named Peggy Fulford, who stole millions from him and other athletes. In fact, in 2023, The Guardian reported that Fulford admitted to stealing millions of dollars from Dennis Rodman, Ricky Williams, and other professional athletes. Imagine trading all your hard-earned checks for faith in a fake financial advisor. Rodman essentially did, and he lost huge. Meanwhile, he was also notorious for avoiding banks. He preferred hauling cash around, which only increased his vulnerability. Decades after his career, Rodman owes large sums in unpaid child and spousal support. Ultimately, even though he made good money on the court and stayed in the spotlight by doing all sorts of bizarre things, his fortune was squandered by support obligations, legal troubles, and that financial con. His story reminds us that even a Hall of Famer isn't immune to ruin if the money's not managed carefully. Like Rodman, Darius Miles arrived with sky-high expectations and big-money contracts. The 6'9" forward jumped straight from high school to the Clippers as the number 3 pick in 2000, and agents compared him to Kevin Garnett. He played 7 NBA seasons, a shortened career marked by injuries and sidesteps. On the surface, he earned big, about $66 million from his NBA paychecks alone. But by 2016, the checkbook was nearly empty. Darius filed for bankruptcy that year, listing just $460,000 in assets against $1.57 million in debts. The reasons were many: costly knee surgeries that ended his career early, multiple legal scrapes, including a 2004 drive-by shooting incident at his home, and what seems to have been wildly poor financial planning. According to reports, Miles even had over $280,000 owed to the IRS, plus hundreds of thousands in child support and tax debt. His case was so public that a Belleville, Illinois news outlet described auctioning off his remaining possessions: jewelry, sports collectibles, a house, just to meet creditors. All that money had disappeared, and he was left to start from zero. Now, he's working to rebuild, but Miles's descent shows how a career-ending injury and lack of financial oversight can undo even a multi-millionaire, leaving behind real-world consequences like unpaid taxes and collapsed finances. Delonte West is a different kind of story, less about lavish spending and more about dealing with demons in public view. West never made the tallest mountain of money. He had around $16 to $17 million in career NBA salary, but he did enjoy success on the court. After basketball, though, everything spiraled. West was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2008, struggled with addiction, and by the mid-2010s, he was repeatedly in the news for the wrong reasons. Viral photos showed him wandering city streets, panhandling, and appearing homeless. In 2020, the Dallas Mavericks' very owner, Mark Cuban, personally spotted West at a gas station in Texas and offered help. ESPN reported Cuban picked up Delonte West at a Dallas gas station on Monday and is attempting to help the homeless former NBA player get his life back on track. Cuban even agreed to pay for rehab to address Delonte's bipolar and substance issues. All this came after pictures of West publicly panhandling circulated online. In short, Delonte ended up broke not from cars or houses, but because his personal struggles, mental illness, and addiction derailed everything. He's open about it now and slowly working on recovery. But his path is a stark lesson that problems away from the court can wipe out earnings just as surely as bad investments. As Cuban noted, he was helping West get back on track. After a career that should have provided a solid life, West's situation reminds viewers that financial collapse can also look like homelessness and healthcare crises. It's still a collapse that made headlines based on public photos and Cuban's intervention. Vin Baker's fall is nearly legendary among former NBA stars. Baker was a four-time All-Star who played 13 seasons and even won an Olympic gold medal. In that time, he pocketed almost $100 million. Yet much of it was squandered. For Vin, the problem wasn't flashy shopping as much as it was a drinking problem and well-meaning but bad investments. A Grunge magazine retrospective recounts that Baker often played games drunk and even sniffed Listerine for a buzz before tip-off. Eventually, his took over. The Providence Journal reports that Vin gave away or lost money to the wrong people and made a string of poor real estate bets. His house got foreclosed, and in a truly crushing move, he was forced to sell his treasured 1992 Olympic gold medal at auction just to pay off debts. By the mid-2000s, he was broke, yet he turned his life around through sobriety. In an inspiring twist, he reached out to former employer Howard Schultz, who owned Starbucks, and got a job behind the counter in Rhode Island. That's right, a man once at the top of basketball's world went to work as a barista to rebuild. Today, he's financially stable, even working as a broadcaster, and sober. But all because he had to gut his way back from literally nothing. Vin Baker's story shows how even a nine-figure fortune can vanish through addiction and bad decisions. It's a full-circle tale. He lost everything, then found purpose again, a living lesson in hitting rock bottom and climbing out. Joe Smith is a cautionary tale for athletes about taxes and unexpected life turns. The #1 pick in 1995, Smith played 16 NBA seasons and amassed about $61 million in salary. Yet, as he has admitted publicly, he ended up with almost nothing. In interviews, Smith said that after taxes, fees, and a divorce, he'd walked away with around $18 million, and at one point found himself down to only $3,000 in his bank account. According to reports, he was actually over $157,000 in debt when he hit that low point. The big culprit was a costly divorce in 2011 that, by his own account, took about $3 million of his nest egg. He also openly blames extravagance, fast cars, and lavish lifestyle for his troubles. These days, Smith isn't driving a Ferrari, but helping others. He runs a basketball training program in Atlanta and occasionally plays overseas. Importantly, he openly shares his story, hoping younger players learn that just because you earn $61 million doesn't mean you end up with $61 million in the bank. The numbers spell it out. After a career of millions, Smith once had virtually empty pockets. His case underlines how college bills, taxes, fees, divorce alimony, and lifestyle can dramatically shrink seemingly rock-solid riches. Then there's Kenny Anderson, a high school phenom turned NBA veteran. Anderson was one of New York's biggest basketball prodigies, and he did well in the league. He made tens of millions over 14 NBA years, but that figure is meaningless now. His life after the NBA was beset by personal turmoil. After he retired, Kenny fathered 7 children with 4 different women, which meant massive child support obligations. He struggled to pay, and in 2005, he declared bankruptcy. Even worse, after getting into legal trouble for a DUI in Florida, Kenny lost a high school coaching job. As reported by the Tennessean, Anderson lost most of his NBA fortune and declared bankruptcy in 2005. By 2019, the news out of Nashville was about his fight back from a stroke, not about wealth. Now, he's coaching men's college basketball at Fisk University, happy just to have steady work and health. Kenny's era-by-era story is both harrowing and hopeful. But for years, he was known as a cautionary figure. 8 figures earned, then gone, largely because endless legal fees, support costs, and misfortune drained it. It's a sobering example that talent on the court doesn't teach you about balancing a bank account. As one profile put it, Anderson grew up who lost most of his NBA fortune and had to start over. Let's not forget the man selected right before Michael Jordan in 1990, Derrick Coleman, known back then as just Derrick, but sometimes written Derrick. This former #1 overall pick made about $87 million during his NBA career. Coleman wasn't blowing cash at casinos. Instead, he tried to pump money back into Detroit, his hometown. He invested heavily in real estate developments to revitalize the city after he retired. Unfortunately, his timing was awful. The economy collapsed around 2008, and Detroit's decline deepened. His projects, like a shopping mall called Coleman's Corner, failed, and he defaulted on loans. In 2010, he filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. His own lawyer explained that Coleman's intent was noble, building jobs and businesses. But due to the state of the economy, his investments could not be sustained. In other words, Derrick Coleman's $87 million fortune vanished into a black hole of failed property bets. He did come out of bankruptcy with an NBA pension, but essentially his on-court earnings were wiped out. It's a tragic irony. A player who once seemed destined to be an NBA great lost it by investing in his city. Today, he's still involved in Detroit community events, but he's no longer wealthy. His story has an unusual twist. It wasn't gambling or luxury that got him, but the highs and lows of business. Still, it serves as a warning that even smart investments carry massive risk. You can't always control the market. Finally, even Shawn Kemp, the hulking Rain Man of the 1990 Seattle Sonics, saw his fortunes tumble. Kemp was a 6-time All-Star who earned about $91 million over his career. After the NBA, he opened a few restaurants and businesses, but the bills piled up. In fact, recent reports show that by the early 2020s, all that hustle left him with only a small fraction of what he made, around a $5 million net worth in 2023, according to estimates. Kemp had multiple children and a number of relationships, which brought huge child support payments. He also had legal troubles and health issues that drained resources. He once spent on a lavish Kazumba party, which was partially funded by loan shark money, a poor financial decision that haunted him. And one of his Seattle restaurant ventures eventually closed its doors. To be fair, Kemp didn't quite go broke like some others. He still owns property and launched a cannabis business recently. But going from $91 million down to barely scraping by shows how extreme the drop was. His example highlights that family pressures and investments gone wrong can swallow your wealth. Today, he speaks more about basketball and community, far from the boardrooms. Kemp's legacy isn't one of a pauper, but it's a reminder that massive earnings can be lost to reckless deals and obligations. These players' tales give us pause. Every one of the above stories, Iverson, Walker, Sprewell, Rodman, Miles, West, Baker, Smith, Anderson, Coleman, Kemp, has been documented in news articles and public records. They're not myths. They appeared in newspapers and court documents. When the crowds fade and the final buzzer sounds, all those NBA checks disappear if they aren't handled right. The biggest takeaway? Financial literacy and planning matter as much as athletic skill. Earning millions is one thing. Keeping and growing it is another. These fallen stars remind us that a legacy isn't just built on championships or highlights, but on what you do with what you earn. Spendthrifts and dreamers alike should heed their caution. Educate yourself, save intelligently, and think long-term. In the end, it's not about the size of the contract you sign, but the financial future you build and the story you leave behind.